Alright, we're going to try a little bit different format video than usual here. I'm going to try just talking at the camera and not looking at my screen over here. And we're going to talk about the project that I worked on instead of a big long step-by-step video. Hopefully that works out and you guys like that. So we're going to be talking about this W12 here, this WPL Toys W12. D12? Model number here. And we will, my whole goal with this project was to make it as realistic looking as I could, because it's got a nice hard plastic, very scale looking body. It is not branded as the actual vehicle that it is, but we're going to look into that as well throughout the whole project here. And we'll just make it look as realistic as possible. My vision for this is for it to be sort of a beat up, used and abused pit truck. I want to stress that I'm saying realistic here and not accurate. I'm not going to be looking at like factory paint colors and making sure everything is exactly as it, the truck is from the factory, but I want to make it look very real. That said, we're still going to try and put some like Suzuki branding on it and some Carry branding on it and stuff like that. So the first step for me there was I wanted to make something cool for the bed. So since this is going to be a pit truck or something like that, I may actually put a hitch on it and try and tow my 1/10 Tamiya TT02 around on it. That's not realistic. These things, as far as I know, at least, these things would not be towing a car. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. So the first step for me was to put a tire rack in the back. Just as like a nice little touch, I could actually put 1/10 scale tires on there. And then, I would want maybe put like a toolbox or something like that underneath there. It was something that I could build out of styrene, which is good because I have a bunch of styrene laying around and I want to improve my styrene skills. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me. And we're going to dive into that process. So the tire rack itself is built out of just some square stock styrene. I don't know the actual size. I pulled it out of a lot, but it's about a 1/4 inch across. And it's basically just a couple of H-frames with a platform on the bottom and then some small platforms on the bottom of the leg. Because in my mind, this would be welded together very quickly at a shop, kind of haphazardly, just good enough to hold it. And then they would bolt it into the back of the truck. So that's why there's some platforms on the bottom. It also does make it a lot easier for me to put some substantial glue on this and make sure that it holds into the bed pretty well. So I'll show a couple clips here of me trying to get the H-frames glued together. I did struggle with this. I was using some styrene glue or some plastic glue, Tamiya super thin in this case, and I had I was just being fiddly with it. I don't know. I maybe if I had some better clamps or something, it would have been a lot easier. But in the end, I used some super glue on top of some of those joints for a little bit extra strength and a little bit of curing spray just to make things stick together a little easier and better for me. It also just kind of looks like bad welds in some of the spots, so it added to some little flair, which was nice. And then, of course, I said I wanted this to be used and abused. So hand painting, I went ahead after first I sprayed it black. I sprayed it black, and then I did some hand painting, and I did a layer of a metallic color, a deeper metallic color here, just along the edges where I think the tires being pulled in and out would have really worn it down, and then as well on a lot of the joints where some of the welds were, because I also was going to add some rust afterwards. But first, yes, went around with a paintbrush and just did a lot of metallic damaging, trying to make it look like the paint was chipping off, stippling. If you've done any scale modeling, you've probably seen this before or tried this before, one of the two. And then just using a couple different colors, rust colors, some bright oranges and some reddish oranges, I brushed a little bit of rust on top of it. And I was kind of careful where I put this because there's not going to be too much rust where the tires are being taken on and off a lot, because those are going to continue to get worn by the tires. But the places like where the joints were and things like that, I did make sure to put some rust and try and make some streaky rust there where some water damage could have easily happened. Also, I forgot to mention before I painted it, I filled the tops in with some Tamiya putty, and I purposely didn't sand the tops down. Wanted it to look kind of messy, as if they just put some flat stock steel there, welded around the edges, and just kind of did a haphazard job there. The beauty of making something that's damaged is when you're modeling it, you don't have to be very specific, because you can just say it's damaged. You can be a terrible modeler and nobody will ever know. But and then I had this open space on the bottom of the rack. So I wanted to build two things there. I'm only going to put one in this video, and that is a compressor. So I hacked up a old dropper bottle I had, or an extra dropper bottle laying around, closed it off with some flat styrene, put some putty around the edges as well just to mold it in, and then I had a few bits left over from a kit. This actually, I think I used two heads from a Forerunner V6 and a couple of other bits. I think the top piece is actually a battery or something like that. But anyway, I just used some bits I had laying around, threw it together, and made it look like a little compressor motor, glued it on the side, and threw some paint on that. For the engine, I just used some metallic paint and then some enamel wash, some enamel panelizer, just to make it look kind of dirty, oily. And then for the tank, I painted it yellow, largely because I had it to me a yellow that I wanted to try out, so I used that. I used a dark or a light rust to show some damage, and then I put a dark rust on top of it to give it a little bit more of a dynamic feel there, make it look a little more realistic. And then I used an oil wash kind of on the whole thing, but a little heavier in some of the rusty areas where the rust would have run down the side of the tank. Once that cured is the word. Once that cured, I used a satin varnish on top. I didn't want to use a gloss varnish because that implies generally new things, and I didn't quite want to do a flat varnish. Flat is very common when you're trying to make things look realistic, when you're doing modeling, little miniature figure painting, any of that kind of stuff. However, since this is a pit truck and would have been welded together recently in the shop and then probably just spray painted with some single stage paint, I figured a satin coat on this would look nice because it's not as new and crisp as a gloss varnish, but it's also doesn't give the idea of it being old. I did use a flat varnish on the compressor though, because I feel like that would be just an old compressor they had laying around the shop and they threw in there. So whether or not that actually translates to the final product, that's for you to decide. I think it worked out. And I do think I'm going to be doing satin on the rest of the truck. But yeah, very simple process. There's an open space next to the compressor that I do want to make a styrene toolbox and put there. So that's going to be the final steps of this. And then I'm going to be doing a whole paint job on the whole body and the interior, trying to make it look very realistic, using a lot of scale modeling tricks. And then we'll get to finishing up the project. So it's gonna be a couple more videos. I may or may not do the chassis. I haven't decided. The chassis might get done into a realistic fashion, but if you want to follow around the project, you like what I'm doing so far, and you want to see the end result, please do give this video a like and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.